Hello everyone. Today I will do a presentation about building strong minds, strategies for long-term learning in the 3rd and 5th grade. And my introduction will be, hi everyone, my name is Joseph Wojtkowiak, and I believe that with the right structure, habits, and encouragement, students can become confident, focused learners. In this video, I'm going to share 4 teaching strategies I personally believe in. One that promotes discipline, mindfulness, and responsibility. These approaches help 3rd and 5th graders transfer what they learn into a long-term memory, and they reflect what I've learned through my own experience working with kids and through my studies in counseling. First strategy, structured routine and daily practices. Children thrive with structure. A predictable classroom routine helps them feel secure and ready to learn. Repeating key concepts daily builds memory. Through consistency, I believe that disciplined rhythm, not rigid but steady, is one of the best ways to help kids retain information. And for example, start each math class with a 5-minute warm-up that reviews the previous day's lessons. Why it works: repetition and structure strengthens the brain's memories pathway. And here I'll show you an example, something I learned back home in Germany when I'm in school. So here in this picture, you'll see apples. And when I was in school, they would bring apples in and tell us like three plus one apple equals four apple. And that just visually seeing that makes you engages your brain, and holding the items, you can tell. And not only that, they would want us to go further, where in this picture, they would ask her like, how would you share that apple? Let's say you were giving one. And that's where we go into fractions, where we would cut the apple up in half, thirds, and quarters, so everyone gets a piece of it. So if you're in a group, you would do that group activity, 4 or 5 students, and each student had an apple, and we would put it on the table, say, like, how many you have in total, how would you split it, how would you have more at the end. It's like a really beautiful sharing experience where you have, hey, apples sharing, and at the same time you learn a little bit of math, simple math. And that should be very encouraged doing group activity and physically holding things instead of seeing just bland numbers on the board. And next one, another warm up. That's something work too, because not every student will have the same mindset. Because even though like holding things and having a sharing experience where we split food and learn math, by the way, I was one of those where, as I was getting older throughout 1st to 4th grade, I was getting a little more wilder because I was allowed to be more free because I was a very quiet child. And as they helped me become more open, I would be more engaged because I was missing out a lot of that in my childhood. So one time I was so bad at math, the whole class for 45 minutes, they would make me stand on the wall and look at the wall and be like, hey, look at these. One plus two equals three, four plus six equals 10. And I would have to just repeat it in my mind or out loud, standing on a wall. And I know in the United States that seems like a punishment, but I feel like students or teachers in Germany have a better feeling about who the person is, who the student is, since they act with them all the time. And that's one of those examples. You would see this on a wall, especially when you do 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 times 2 equals 4, and they would have this whole wall section of the divide and minus, plus. And let's go to the second strategy. Strategy 2, storytelling to spark focus and connection. Telling a short story and cheerful story can grab their attention and help them settle in. A well-chosen story, funny, exciting, or inspiring, creates a natural emotion bridge to the lesson. It brings their energy into focus without forcing stillness. Kids love a good story, and when it ties into the subject, it lights up their mind and prepares them to learn. Example: before a lesson on perseverance, tell a quick story about a puppy learning to climb stairs, falling, trying again, and finally making it. Why it works: emotionally engaging stories help students calm down, relate to the material, and shift into a learning mindset. And yes, in back home in Germany, we would bring in animals and stuff like that, especially from the surrounding area. And I will touch up on it later, because in this example, actually, when I went to OCCC, I took geography, and there was this very nice elderly professor. He was retired. He said he worked for 20 years in China and Singapore. Very lovely person, and he would teach us about like how a tornado forms. And he would draw on a Sharpie board the map of Oklahoma, and he would make us all engaged. Like, hey, why do tornadoes form in Oklahoma? And he said like, well, what is south Texas and Louisiana and all that stuff. They say, well, the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, whichever you want to choose. And he would say, like, you get the warm, moist air because it's in the water, you have the ocean there, and the air is hot, so we get hot, moist air. And then again, we have what is south of Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, like, well, Mexico. From there, we get the hot, warm air from the south entering Oklahoma. And they would ask, like, what is north of the United States? Canada. And north of Canada is the Antarctic, and we would get cold Arctic air coming down. And in fact, I remember back then we would get cold Arctic air from Russia passing through the Arctic, going to Canada, and then hitting Oklahoma, where we would have like non-stop couple weeks of below freezing temperatures. And we also get winds from the jet stream and sometimes from the west coast, a little cold air. But hot and cold air hits, and we form tornadoes. And without even thinking about it, we mentioned the Gulf, Texas, Mexico, Canada, Russia, Antarctica, several states, and you just learn a fun, engaged moment about how tornadoes are formed by stating where all the cold winds are coming from. And let's jump into the next strategy, strategy 3, active engagement and movement. I believe in being a person of action, and our students need that too. Learning shouldn't just be sitting and listening. When kids move, create, and participate, they remember more. Engagement through activity creates deeper understanding. Example, use stations or team-based activities to teach science, value like vocabulary, matching words to action, or building models. Why it works? Physical involvement boosts memory by trying learning to real experience. And here I'll use the example from back home, Germany, when I went to school. So I'll show a picture like where we go to the forest as a class. As a class, we form groups, and I'll show you a picture where I grew up. The professor might appreciate it because I mentioned it a lot where I grew up. And this is pretty much Emmetscourt where I grew up in, and it's on the mountain, and you see there's all the forest. And literally, I grew up in this building right here, and the moment I would leave, like I would go to the back, and there was the forest, and we'd walk up the mountain and the forest. And when we do school trips, like the school I went to, Waldparkschule Boxberg, it's on the left side. Let me see if this works. Let me use the mouse right here. You go to the left, there's Boxberg, and then you have Waldparkschule. And when we go out of the class, for example, this is a Blindschleiche. In English, it's like a blind creeper. So it's a very small snake you can see, and it's blind. And it's always like has a copper color, a silver color, gold color, very harmless. They're everywhere where I grew up, held them. And as a class, we'd be like, oh, that's the Blindschleiche, that's the snake. And you would find calmly, and it's kind of fun to play with wild animals. And then we have the salamander. In German, we say salamander, same word, differently pronounced. But we'd see those every time you grab them, we'd take them to school, have an aquarium, then something to have. But we catch that and like have it in our school, feed it, bring food from home to feed the salamander. And another thing, we have a lot of snails in Germany or where I grew up in. So they're all over the place. You can grab them. They tell us like, hey, there's bacteria. You shouldn't lick it. Like early on, we were taught about animals, like how to treat it, what not to do, and no one gets sick. Like I remember a couple years ago where children would eat the Tide Pods, which is extremely strange to me because why would you eat a Tide Pod? But back home in Germany, when we were really early on in school, like wild animals, as cute, as harmless they seem, they also bring their own fair share of danger, and we're very well aware because the wildlife is beautiful and nature is beautiful, but they all have their fair share of risk, and you are exposed to it, and you learn it as a group. And in school, that's what we did, and that's what I would also like to introduce here. Again, let me go to next strategy. Strategy 4, guide reflection and self-talk. In counseling, I've seen how cognition behavioral strategies help us change the way we think. We can teach kids to reflect on what they learned and how they feel about it. When they speak it out loud or explain it to a friend, they make stronger connection. Example, after a lesson asks, what's the one thing you learned today? How will you use it tomorrow? Whiteward's cognition training helps students become responsible learners who know how to process and retain information. And in my school, we were pretty rough. Group of a lot of people, refugees from the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc, a lot of people from North Africa, wars from the Middle East, Iraqis, Kurds, Turks. We had tons of Russians, so people all over the world, and we don't mingle well, so there's conflict. But our teachers were always really well prepared for it because as conflict came, they were prepared for it because when it came to stress, we reflect on it instead of having this anger come over. They made us sit down and like we don't call the police, we don't contact the parents right away. We because why go to a third source to try to teach the kids something that they done? You need to deal by the source. When children done something, you have to directly address them. And in Germany, always like they poke you with the finger, they're on your face, they talk to you deeply like, hey, if that behavior continues, you will not have a good life afterwards. Jail, not good careers, not academically doing well. And it was intense and a little bit intimidating, but it's something that needs to be an early exposure to help children realize, hey, what you do wrong. Because in your society, you tend to expel people. That's the greatest reward you can do to a child. Kick them out. Oh, I'll have a 2 week vacation, not in school. In Germany, always like, if you do wrong, you do community hours. You either help clean up the school or they'll send you to a community center to do that. And school and the agency institution will be aware of it to work together. But it's very much very not punishing, but it's community oriented. They would always, take a task that helps overall, and it makes me think. Like I had 20 hours of community hours, and I had to help the janitor clean the yard, help to clean the school. Was sent to Harlem to a community center where I would have to listen to adults boss me around and do things. But it wasn't like bad. It was more like they have professionals handling it, people who are trained. That's why I think it's very empowering to teach kids early on to reflect because when you teach them, they'll learn. My conclusions are to sum up these four strategy structures, routines, mindful transition, active engagement, and guided reflection are more than just techniques. They help shape students into confident, capable learners. They reflect my own belief that kids need structure, purpose, and connection to grow when they teach with intention. We help them build minds that remember and lives that matter. And that is my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. Comment about what you think, and you all have a great day. Bye bye.